Hi, my name's Mary Brennan. I'm a programming writer for Microsoft SQL Server. In this video, I'll use the installation wizard to install a new instance of SQL Server 2008. There are several steps involved in installing SQL Server 2008. First, I'll review the hardware and software requirements, run the system configuration checker, and review security considerations. Then, I'll use the Installation Center to launch the installation wizard. Finally, I'll ensure that all components were installed successfully. At the very end, I'll share some tips for a successful installation. Remember that all installations are different. This tutorial will take you through a basic installation. The SQL Server Installation Wizard provides a unified way to install all SQL Server components, so you don't have to install each component individually. You may notice that the AdventureWorks database is not on this list. That's because samples must be installed separately from the Codeplex website. Downloading and installing samples will be covered in a separate video. To begin the installation, insert the SQL Server installation media, and from the root folder double-click setup.exe. To install from a network share, navigate to the root folder on the share and then double-click setup.exe. If you don't have the Microsoft .NET Framework version 2.0 or Windows Installer 4.5 installed, you will be prompted to install them now. You may have to restart your computer when the installations are finished. Once your prerequisites are installed, the SQL Server Installation Center planning screen opens. Review the hardware and software requirements and the security documentation. Run the system configuration checker to look for any condition that will prevent a successful installation. You must correct any failures before setup can continue. Click Installation to open the installation wizard. To create a new installation of SQL Server 2008, click New SQL Server Installation or add features to an existing installation. The Setup Support Rules checker will verify the system state of your computer. You must correct any failures before setup can continue. On the Product Key page, indicate whether you are installing a free version of SQL Server or whether you have a key for the product. On the License Terms page, read the license agreement and then select the checkbox to accept the licensing terms and conditions. The installation wizard will install files needed to perform the installation. You must correct any failures before setup can continue. On the Feature Selection page, select the components for your installation. A description for each component group appears in the right-hand pane after you select the feature name. You can select a combination of checkboxes. Be sure to select the management tools that you will need. SQL Server management tools include SQL Server Management Studio, SQL Server Profiler, SQL Server Database Tuning Advisor, Command Prompt Tools, and BIDS, which stands for Business Intelligence Development Studio. Regardless of how many instances of SQL Server, analysis services, or reporting services are installed on a computer, only one copy of SQL Server 2008 Management Tools will be installed. These management tools can run side by side on the same computer with earlier versions of the management tools. Note that Business Intelligence Development Studio is a separate option during SQL Server installation. You can also specify a custom directory for shared components by using the field at the bottom of this page. On the Instance Configuration page, specify whether to install a default or named instance. If you specify a named instance, the name you type is used as the instance ID. This naming convention identifies installation directories and registry keys for your instance of SQL Server. For a default instance, the name and ID would be MS SQL Server. Typically, standalone instances of Microsoft SQL Server 2008, whether default or named, use the default value of the instance ID. The default instance root directories are displayed in the middle of the screen. To specify a non-default root directory, use the field provided or click Browse to locate an installation folder. All SQL Server service packs and upgrades will apply to every component of an instance of SQL Server. Click Next. The Disk Space Requirements page calculates the required disk space for the features you specify. It then makes sure that there is enough disk space available. On the Server Configuration Service Accounts page, specify login accounts for SQL Server services. The actual services that are configured on this page depend on the features that you are installing. Use the Collation tab to specify non-default collations for the database engine and analysis services. Account provisioning and service accounts are covered in more detail in Books Online. The configuration will be unique to your installation. I recommend using the forums and these links to learn more about account provisioning and service accounts. On the Database Engine Account Provisioning page, specify the security mode, Windows authentication is recommended, and specify at least one SQL Server administrator. To add the account under which SQL Server setup is running, click Add Current User. Use the Data Directories tab to specify non-default installation directories. To install to a default directory, click Next. Use the File Stream tab to enable file stream for your instance of SQL Server. If the following conditions are true, then file stream should be installed. Objects that are being stored are, on average, larger than 1 megabyte. Fast read access is important, or you are developing applications that use a middle tier for application logic. Give administrator permissions for analysis services to the current user. Install to the default directories. For this tutorial, we'll install the native mode default configuration for reporting services. Let's send information to Microsoft that will help to improve SQL Server. The System Configuration Checker will run one more set of rules to validate your computer configuration with the SQL Server features you have specified. The System Configuration Check passed, so click Next. We're ready to install. The install options we selected are displayed. If everything looks correct, click Install. After installation, the Complete page provides a link to the summary log file for the installation and other important notes. It is important to read the message from the installation wizard when you are done with setup. To complete the SQL Server installation process, click Close. If you are instructed to restart your computer, do so now. The Installation Center has some great tools for you to use now that SQL Server is installed. On the Maintenance page, you can upgrade or repair your installation. On the Tools page, you can run a report that lists the SQL Server features installed on the local server. On the Resources page, you'll find links to documentation, forums, the Development Center, and much more. Use the Advanced page to manage different types of installations. Back on the Resources page, the link at the bottom will take you to the Codeplex website, where you can download samples and sample databases. The last thing we'll do is check the installation. Click Start, All Programs, Microsoft SQL Server 2008. From here, we can access the Configuration and Management Tools, Installation Center, Documentation, Tutorials, Business Intelligence Development Studio, SQL Server Management Studio, and more. Here are a few tips to help you successfully install SQL Server 2008. If you need to install FileStream, remember to do so during the installation wizard process. FileStream can be installed after the fact, but it's an extra step that I like to avoid. If you have Visual Studio installed on your machine, ensure that you have the most recent version. If you specify non-default installation directories, ensure that the installation folders are unique to this instance of SQL Server. None of the directories should be shared with directories from other instances of SQL Server. For local installations, you must run setup as an administrator. If you install SQL Server from a remote share, you must use a domain account that has read and execute permissions on the remote share. For additional help installing SQL Server 2008, I recommend these pages. This concludes the Installing SQL Server 2008 video tutorial.